Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. This is senior writer and columnist Michael Lev of the Arizona Daily Star. I am joined today by my colleague Bruce Pascoe. Bruce and I both had a late night last night covering the Arizona BYU game at McHale Center. Victory for the Wildcats. We're back up and at it on Thursday morning, ready to talk Arizona men's basketball. We thank everybody for joining us today. Bruce, how are you holding up, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. I mean, deadlines are weird these days, so all night games are really late nights. But but I'm kind of a night owl, so I'm hanging in there.
I am a night owl as well. That doesn't mean that I like writing until like 1 a.m. or whatever it is. But you know what? As long as they let us keep doing these jobs, I have no complaint, right? I mean, we're seeing stuff in our industry where entire sports sections are being wiped out and so forth. We love what we do, and we love to bring content to the very passionate Arizona fans who are kind of out in full force last night. I thought the building was really lively for that game. I don't know if it was like they felt what Tommy was talking about after the game. Like they felt like they needed to step up their game a little bit to help the team, which was a little shorthanded, but it was a fun atmosphere.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think Arizona fans at their best, I think they're best when then they know the team needs them. And, whether it's even in the first half, if they get down 8 points in the first half, people start standing up. But certainly if they get in trouble in the second half, and I think this whole game last night, everybody knew that they were down and to kind of help them rise up. I think, you saw that a little bit at Kansas when Arizona played there to the Wildcats' detriment. They had to deal with that. That was the craziest place I've ever heard. And I think that was, they're always crazy there, but I think it was even worse because they knew that Darren Peterson was out and they wanted to keep that energy level up. And I think the same thing, happened at McHale last night.
Well, those fans have had a good deal of practice watching and cheering for Kansas without Darren Peterson, who I'm just sort of become this like Big 12 man of mystery. Not having Koa Pete in the lineup, that was a new phenomenon for Arizona last night. Dwayne Aristode also was out. He's got a sickness or illness that's keeping him on the sideline. So, we had this kind of new look rotation. C.D. Gay played 10 minutes, which was the most he's ever played. Evan Nelson played only 4 minutes, but they were 4, meaningful minutes, right? They were in the first half. All the games still being contested. Yeah. They were both plus in the plus minus. C.D. did some good things. He also accumulated some fouls, which seems to be a problem of his. But what did you make of, how that all kind of played out last night?
I think it was probably about as good as you could have expected. I think, the surprise was that Braden Burries was also fighting that whatever he had. And you texted me that or alerted me to that post he had where, looked like an IV was going in. I mean, crazy stuff was going on. So, and he didn't play great, but he gutted it out and just was out there. But it was kind of what I thought. I thought a best case scenario was, some of the role players, especially Del Orso, picks it up, and maybe they get a couple of serviceable 5 to 8 minutes serviceable from both Nelson and Gay. And that's pretty much what happened, again. And then even Ivan Kurchenkov came through with probably, he's always been pretty solid and consistent all season, but I think offensively he kind of, filled the gap a little bit there and scored a little more than he usually needs to because, the opportunity was there and he knew like everybody that he needed to. So it was good. I will say, I don't know about you, Michael, but I think, you see this over and over where teams lose key guys, and usually that first game, the team rallies and they're pretty good, and guys are motivated and full of energy. But after that, it can go either way. So we'll see especially with Houston coming up. It's going to be
I was going to say, I think in this particular instance, it really could be matchup dependent. Facing BYU at home, and BYU missing probably its second best player, right? Richie Saunders. For the entire season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they were shorthanded as well. And then you've got Houston coming up on Saturday, which is a top 5 team, might be the best team in the Big 12. Again, a legitimate contender for the national championship. That's going to be, they would have had a hard time beating them with a full roster. We'll talk about that game a little bit later here in the podcast. But I want to ask you a little bit more about the guys who played and then the guys who didn't play. So C.D. Gay kind of arrived late in the summer, correct? Had some visa-related issues. Just getting him into the country and on campus was a bit of a challenge. What can you tell us about that? And then just sort of what you know about his development over the course of the season, mostly behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hard because we can't go to practice. We can't talk to him for the most part. I think I talked to him the last time I probably talked to him was for 2.5 minutes at a preseason event they did on the South Side. And, just half of it was he was talking in Spanish, and, his English is really limited. My Spanish is even more limited. And I tried to get a feel for what was going on. And, at that time he was sitting. He was limited in practice. So I think he had some preseason limitations. As you said, he didn't even get here. All international students, from what I understand, are having problems and, the current environment. And he apparently was stuck in Madrid for a long time. I think he was initially denied, but I don't know the whole details because, he hasn't said it. He did appear briefly with us at a press conference and just said something about how it was, he needed a lot of patience or whatever, or something like that. So it's been a journey for him for sure. Behind the scenes, I don't know. We haven't seen him much just here or there, but he certainly looked promising when he's been out there. But obviously a little bit uncontrolled, fouling every minute or two. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Emmanuel Stephan last year, but maybe a little bit different player. But both players had a lot to learn as far as containing themselves. But but you can see his upside. I mean, he had a couple of great sequences there with a dunk and a putback, I think, and really, hustle, just going after some loose balls, things like that. Really was crowd pleasers. I think he actually energized the crowd as well as them energizing the team. So that was kind of fun to watch. And then, we'll see. I mean, I honestly don't know, down the road how it's going to play out. I think you were there, Michael, when somebody asked, when you get past this, is he going to be, when you get past this co-Pete thing or whatever, is he going to be a guy who helps? And, Tommy Lloyd didn't really want to go there. So it remains to be seen. But, and I think probably part of his hesitation is Lloyd is always very, very cognizant of fouling and getting other teams in the bonus and things like that. And I think I think that's a big part of it. He just doesn't want to go there. But, if Gay sticks around, there's no question he, and learns a little bit to play under control. There's no question he can really be something. Maybe this season a little bit, but certainly in future seasons if he sticks around.
Yeah, he's obviously needs time in the weight room. I mean, he's not nearly as bulky as the guys who play on a regular basis, but very energetic.
Yeah.
You can't coach that kind of length that he has. Looks like, someone who could be a significant contributor here in the future. I just think that these experiences are so valuable for him. And even Evan Nelson, who's, played a ton of college basketball, but hasn't played in the Big 12, getting these minutes in meaningful situations will do them a lot of good if they're needed later on in the season or in the postseason, right? You never know what's going to happen. We expect Pete to be back, but he could turn an ankle in a game, and they need C.D. to come in. Jaden Bradley could get in foul trouble, and they might need Evan Nelson to play a few minutes here and there. So to me, the value is there might be some short-term pain with those guys, but I think that there's some long-term gain potential just from playing in these high leverage, high pressure situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think during that 23-0 start, it was really hard to pick apart what's wrong with this team, or was there something that could be done better. And a lot of people fixated on the 3-point shooting, the fact they don't shoot many of them, but that's easily explained by the fact that they don't need to most of the time. Last night being an exception, but usually they're able to get inside, get to the free throw line, etc. Don't need to rely on that. But the other question I kind of always wondered about was, and this is a hard thing because things are going so well with their top 8. But like, how much do you want to sprinkle some minutes in there and get those guys a little more developed and seasoned or whatever you want to call it? So when the times like this come up, they're ready, but they it seemed like, Evan Nelson hasn't played many games at this level, but he has a lot of college basketball experience. So, that's got to help him. And I think CD Gay is really the question there. How many minutes do you get him? And, and for situations like this, and here he is. So we'll see how it goes from here.
So Koa Pete is not going to play against Houston for sure. They've ruled him out, right, because of this lower leg muscle strain situation. What do you know about his injury? When do you think it first cropped up, and when do you think he might be back?
Yeah, I think it. It definitely didn't just happen against Texas Tech. I think it's really difficult to tell. But if you look at his stats, and I think there's a possibility it happened or it worsened during Oklahoma State, because he had that really good game against ASU, and then he hasn't been quite the same from the field since then. He hasn't shot well from the free throw line. So those are things that kind of would indicate there's probably some issues with his mobility or elevation, maybe hurting a little bit. He's a very tough player. As we know, he played with a broken hand to help his get Perry High win the championship in high school last year. So, he's not, this is not just nothing. Like, this is something that, may have even been something that would keep some other players out. I don't know, but probably was a pretty significant deal. And the fact that, and that he's not shooting well, it sounds like they needed to shut him down. But that said, a lot of this is my own speculation, because we don't usually get a whole lot of, information about that. You just kind of have to read between the lines on some of this stuff. And it sounds to me like he wasn't getting better. It was affecting his shooting. So they figure they evaluated him last week, and I think they found it sounds like kind of a calf lower leg type of strain. And, that might need another week or so, because you want to get that taken care of before the Big 12 tournament, and certainly the NCAA tournament. So I think that's what's going on. I think that Tommy Lloyd said last night, I think he made some mention that he would be reevaluated when they got back from Baylor next week. So that would indicate he's probably out for the Baylor game as well.
Yeah, just to give everyone a reminder, Arizona has 5 regular season games left, starting with the Texas trip, where they go to Houston on Saturday and then at Baylor on Tuesday. Kansas comes here on Saturday, February 28th. That'll be a scene, no question about it. The home finale is against Iowa State on Monday, March 2nd, and then there's one more regular season game on Saturday, March 7th, before the Big 12 tournament begins on March 10th. So if he was out for a week or 2 weeks, it would be okay, right? It wouldn't be that big of a deal. And again, you have to kind of think big picture here if you're the Wildcats, right? Like, hey, we don't need to rush this guy back. We don't need to win a bunch of games just to make the NCAA tournament. Now, could they lose their number 1 seed if they really, bomb down the stretch? Maybe. The committee will sometimes take into consideration the absence of a key player, but it makes no sense whatsoever to rush him back for any reason, right? Like, you want to get him right for when it really matters. And that's, maybe you can make an argument for the Big 12 tournament, but I would say the NCAA tournament is where you want your entire team to kind of be peaking its healthiest at its best. So, caution is the way to go here with this Pete injury.
Absolutely. I'm sure that's what they're doing. And also it's been proven that it was one of their sort of principles in the seeding. If a key player is out and you lose, and then that key player comes back, and it's pretty obvious that you were down without him, and that's why you lost a game or two, they'll give you a little bit of, credit, so to speak, for that. And so, for example, if they lose, even if they lose 3 times out of these last 5 games without Pete, but they win the Big 12 tournament, they might still be the number 1 seed, because they'll discount those losses a little bit if it's proven that was that big a deal with Pete out, as long as you have that player back for the tournament and they know that you're going to have him back. So that's part of it a bit too. Yeah, I don't think they should mess around. And as we discussed, it's the benefit is, in the meanwhile, they're forcing all these other guys to kind of step up, and it puts pressure on anybody. And I thought maybe it was the final kind of push that Del Orso needed to have that night that he did last night. He denied that was the case, but it certainly looked like something. He if nothing else, he took advantage of the opportunity that he was given.
Yeah, great for his confidence.
Yeah,
no question about it. So I asked Tommy Lloyd last night what he makes of the rash of injuries that have kind of hit some star players in the Big 12. Got a that's a great question response, which is proud moment for me there in the press conference room.
Usually,
but he
usually says that about my questions. So sometimes,
yes,
not usually.
Yes, yeah. So he was like, that is he paused and kind of thought about it and didn't really have like a concrete answer or theory, but you could tell that it was something that he had been thinking about a little bit. And as you mentioned, we like to read between the lines here.
Yeah.
As reporters. What did you make of his answer about that question? Like, what do you think he was kind of getting at? And by the way, we're talking about not only Richie Saunders, but JT Toppin, who suffered a torn ACL against ASU on Tuesday night after playing a ton of minutes on Saturday against Arizona.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I looked it over and I listened to it again. And he was saying, well, we could say some things, but we'd all be speculating and blah, blah, blah. And like you said, that's our job. Okay. So if I had to guess, I think it's maybe a little bit related to the fact that the Big 12 has purposely backloaded a lot of big games after the Super Bowl. They made that clear, and Lloyd told us that when I asked him about it, he said the Big 12 actually apologized to him that they were giving him all these big games towards the end, because they said they wanted to maximize their exposure and make their television partners happy. And certainly it's great. I mean, look at this Saturday. ESPN's got what 4 of the top 5 teams playing each other, and one of those matches is because the Big 12 created that matchup, Arizona at Houston. They waited till February 21st. It's not January 21st or whatever. It's not a random Tuesday night. It's a big deal. So the downside to that is possible that you could read into that saying, well, so many big games in a row, 2 big games potentially every week for some of these teams, and some of these guys are playing 36 to 40 minutes a game and high stress games that wears on you, certainly mentally, and then maybe physically. I mean, Toppin's played tons of minutes all season, and then he plays 44, I think, on Saturday here. Mm-hmm. Then what, 2-3 days later, in a non-contact situation, his knee just buckles. And same with Richie Saunders, who's played a lot of minutes for BYU. And so you just wonder. I mean, I know I asked Kevin Young the same thing about it, and he said, and he's a guy who's been in the NBA most of his career, or pro, a G League or whatever. And he said he thought it was a little unusual, and he's a guy who's used to playing three games a week. So, whether that or just maybe in this era, coaches are relying even harder on these guys who are at the top, that they're,
of their payroll. Is that what you're trying?
Oh, basically, yeah. I mean, we all know what JT Toppin's making. I mean, that's been widely reported that he's around $4 million. So if you could say he's, they definitely making him earn it. That's for sure. He's played a ton of minutes. So, but I don't know exactly what he was saying, but that's what that's at least part of it.
I think that's a good read on the situation. I sincerely hope we never get to the point in college basketball, quote unquote, college basketball, which is basically semi-pro or pro basketball these days, where where we're talking about load management and guys are
Yeah.
like being rested. But I do think that coaches can do a better job of managing players' minutes. Like I think Tommy Lloyd has been guilty of playing guys, especially Jaden Bradley, too much at times. And I think he would benefit over the course of a season. And it's pretty much too late now because his career is almost over, but playing 3 or 4 minutes less per game. And that just adds up. You 3 or 4 minutes over the course of a 30-game season, that's basically 2 games or almost 3 games.
Yeah.
So it's not, to me, it's not like load management. We don't want that, but I think the coaches can do a better job of managing the minutes of some of these players.
Yeah, and I think you could argue, and that speaks to the earlier point too about do you play C.D. Gay and Evan Nelson Moore? Maybe if you sprinkle those guys in earlier, they not only can develop, but maybe you sit down Bradley. The downside is, and I think coaches are super competitive; they want to win, and that eight man was going really well. So Tommy Lloyd didn't want to do that, and it's hard to blame him that way. But but in my view, coaches would never want to admit this, but in my view, a loss early might have been just as well because the expectations get too high when you're going 23-0. Everybody's expecting the Final Four. The way it is now, if they don't get to the Final Four, the season's going to be considered a disappointment. And, you just ratchet expectations up really, really high. So, maybe if you spread it out and something happens, okay. I mean, that's the way I would do it, but I have no idea. And again, it's hard to criticize that because it was going so well, and and players and coaches alike want to win, and it's just hard. It's hard sometimes, I think, to see a bigger picture when things are going like that.
Of course, you alluded to Anthony Del Orso a couple times earlier. Had his best game as a Wildcat, one could argue. Certainly the most points he's ever scored as a Wildcat. 22 points, made 4 of 8 3-pointers, had a couple dunks. And he kind of downplayed his performance after the game, like, really nothing out of the ordinary. I expected this to happen, blah, blah. But it was pretty clear that this was a significant performance for him, that he needed something like this to happen. He'd been in a slump for a while. I looked it up. I think there were 9 games since TCU when he scored 17 points, and he hit double digits twice during that 9-game span. I think it was like 10 and 11 points. In the other 7 games, he had 5 points or fewer. And in 3 of those games, he had 0 points. Okay. Yeah. So this has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
And it was just nice to see. He had you could tell after the game, he was happy about things, even if he didn't express it to us explicitly. But that is one of those, like you said, kind of a positive offshoot of guys being hurt, is that it gives an opportunity for someone like an Anthony Del Orso to get more chances to shoot the ball, have a bigger role. And if he comes through, that's great, right? Like, hey, this guy, he's capable of doing it. And the way that the way that BYU defended Arizona last night, I think, is how a lot of teams are going to try to defend them, right? Yeah. I mean, they're going to sag off. They are going to let them shoot threes. Like, hey, if we're going to let you shoot threes, and if you make them, so be it. But we got to pick our poison, and we're going to pack the paint. They were doubling every post touch. Other teams are going to try to replicate that. So someone, Anthony Del Orso or Braden Burries or whoever, they're going to have to hit some outside shots at some point. So a game like last night, to me, is very beneficial for not only Delhi, but the entire team.
Yeah. It's a little bit surprising. I haven't seen more of that, but it is a pick your poison deal, and a lot of teams haven't gone there. There have been limited times, and then there have been times when they've done that, and Del Orso has been off, and they still managed to dominate inside, and so they've sort of survived it. But I think last night, and certainly Texas Tech also was for different reasons. I think they were able to handle Arizona's defensively. And I think caused them problems, because I've always thought if a team could at least sort of neutralize them inside, and force them to shoot, that's going to be a hard situation. But I think Del Orso, again, he sort of denied it, but I just thought maybe here's a situation where he's going all through the Big 12 season and they're winning games, and it doesn't really seem to matter if he's on or off. They're winning anyway. But last night was a situation where I would think he would know he had to have a big game. And then certainly, like you said, the way they're playing Arizona defensively open up opportunities. And he seems like he has that sort of confidence. He says he has it all the time. I think he probably does, but I think there's got to be something there even more so when he knows he's needed, that he's like that. And it reminds me a little bit of the way they beat Oregon in the second round last year, where he took the ball, was a couple different times, was fouled, managed to control it, and then went to the line, hit 4 free throws in the last, whatever it was, minute or so. And he said something after, like, I told myself, I know we're going to hit these free throws and we're going to New Jersey. I mean, there was no doubt in his mind. And Delorso, is one of those guys too, that refreshingly kind of tells you, seems like he kind of tells you what's really on his mind. Sometimes you don't know. And, he's a confident guy. And so I think between his confidence and the fact that they needed him, and it was like, there was not an option for him to be slumping last night. If he had slumped, they would have lost, and I got to think that counts for something.
Yeah, and you also referenced Ivan Karchenkov earlier, kind of doing a little bit more last night than what we've seen from him on the offensive end. He's been a major factor for this team on the defensive end with steals and just sort of being an energy guy, very pesky and physical, but he's clearly capable of doing more than that. He showed some elements to his offensive game that we really hadn't seen that much in the mid-range. Mostly kind of been a 3-and-D player, slash to the hoop as well. But again, like, I felt like it was it's significant for this year's team because, again, there could be a game where they need him to score, or other guys might be slumping, or they might be the focal point of opposing defenses. And then you never know what the future holds. But if he comes back to Arizona next year, he probably will have a more prominent role, and get a little sneak preview of what he might be capable of. And he's a really good all-around basketball player.
Yeah. I think the comparison's been Pelle Larsson, and Pelle Larsson's now starting in the NBA. And he's probably better at this. In fact, I'm sure he's better at this point in his career than Pelle Larsson was. But I mean, he had experience playing on a high level in the Germany league, and it's been interesting. Maybe it's been a good thing for him in a way that he's been kind of under the radar, because I think nationally when people talk about the freshmen at U of A, they're talking about Pete and Burries. Nobody's really talking about him, but he's been as key as any of these guys, and in a lot of times in ways that don't get in the box score. Last night he did get in the box score instead of being the hockey assist guy or whatever. He took it to the hoop, and he took 12 shots last night. I mean, yeah. So and you're right, showing he's capable of that, and certainly if he does return, he'll play a huge role, because it's going to be a much different team this season. So that's got to be. I think that's interesting. You brought that up because of all the things that happened against last night against BYU, you think of C.D. Gay and you think of Burries struggling through the sickness, and maybe some Evan Nelson, and then certainly Delorso, but Ivan Karchenkov's night was probably as maybe important as anything.
So he's had 6 games this season with 10 or more field goal attempts, and 3 of those are the last 3 games. So I don't know if that's just a coincidence, or maybe it's just a sign that he's becoming more comfortable, being a little bit more aggressive on the offensive end. Or it could also be just the fact that Koa Pete didn't play for much of the Texas Tech game, and then didn't play at all against BYU, and they just needed more out of Ivan, and he recognized that. Just an interesting little stat to note.
Struggling, and also Pete was struggling. Even in the Kansas game, Pete wasn't really. He was struggling to get his shot off inside, especially, and Karchenkov did pretty well in that game actually, and took 11 shots, I think. So yeah. You know.
6 for 14
6 for 11,
against Kansas. 6 for
yeah.
11 from
6 for
two.
11 inside, yeah.
Yeah, 13 points, 6 boards, and he'll also like always provide steals. One of those guys who's going to be among the team leaders in stocks, as I like to call them, steals plus blocks. So 2 more topics here, real quick for you, Bruce, before we let you go and get back to your real work. Last night, my real work is going to be watching the U.S. Versus Canada women's hockey gold medal game here in about 15 minutes. So last night, it didn't quite get to the point of the first game against BYU where, like, they lost the lead and the game was really in jeopardy. But there were some problems, again, dealing with the full court press at the end of the game. Yeah. And I asked Tommy Lloyd about it, and he was kind of like, you know what? Yes, we could definitely do better at this, but, we're not the only ones who struggle. Like, look across college basketball. Everyone struggles in these situations. He also said that, the Cougars were able to kind of defend with impunity because they weren't in the bonus yet. So they could be super aggressive, and maybe the arrow was favoring them. Yeah. I agree with her. I understand and acknowledge everything that he's saying, but I'm not sure I buy it either. I feel like they've been way too sloppy in those situations. I'm very surprised that they don't have anything that kind of resembles a set play, maybe bringing a big down to set a screen, something of that nature, maybe running some football patterns as you see some teams do. Jaden Bradley, who is a great player, one of the best point guards in the country. Sometimes he just sort of, I don't know, he loses his mind in those situations and does some unsound fundamental things with the basketball. What do you make of, Tommy's explanation of it and just their overall kind of ability to handle those late game full court press situations?
Well, I think you've got a better handle on it than I could probably explain what you just said, but because I think that's a lot of it. I mean, it's never been a huge part of his teams over these 5 years. And maybe part of it is personnel wise, he doesn't, feel like that's their forte, or maybe they're better in, other things other than just really, really occasionally using it. I thought the fouling not being in the bonus and gives you that ability to have a little extra aggressiveness. I don't know. I think there's something to that. It was just interesting to me. It was an interesting answer. And I thought, I was thinking about the days, if that happened under a Sean Miller team, he would go off about how bad it was and what they need to do to fix it. And there would be no, he would not be happy, whereas Lloyd's, big picture perspective guy, who gave you that answer and doesn't seem that concerned about it. And, but that, I think sometimes he says things like that to keep us, off a little bit. And I think he's probably a little bit more upset than he's letting on. And maybe they're going to do some tweaks to get that better. Cause you're right. I mean, there's certainly going to be some occasions in the next month where they're going to need to pull that out and have it work a little bit better.
Yeah. I think part of it too is he trusts his guys, right? Like he doesn't feel like he needs to manufacture a press break because he has these veteran guards. Yeah. But sometimes the pressure gets to you. And I mean, Jaden Bradley, like, he should know better than to casually bring the ball up and not, he had a total brain cramp 10-second violation last night. And then he had another situation where he, dribbled toward the sideline, and that just makes it easier for the defense to defend you, right? It gives you like an extra defender when you do that. I don't mean to pick on Jaden. Like I said, one of the best point guards in the country, tied his career high with 10 assists last night, but I think he would even acknowledge that he could do better in those situations.
Yeah. And he also, and you pointed this out earlier, I mean, if it's happening deep in the game, he played another 38 minutes last night. He has shown, and I always think of I think at Kansas State last year, there's been some other times when, late in the game, and this is hardly unusual for a point guard, just that extra minute, maybe it just keeps you a little less sharp and something like that happens. But, again, he's had a heck of a year overall. It's hard to fault that.
Correct. So last topic here, and that is the upcoming game against Houston. This is on Saturday at 1 p.m. our time here in Arizona. That would be, I think, 2 o'clock Central Time, right? Over there in Houston. And this game is on ABC, so kind of a big deal when you're on broadcast network like that. And Tommy was, of course, very complimentary of Houston last night. And I think the thing that stood out to me was, he was just talking about their DNA, basically, right? Like they do what they do. They have a certain style of play. They stick with it. They are always super tough, physical, defensive oriented. They make things difficult for you. If you look at the Big 12 season-long statistics, they allow the fewest points per game in the league. No surprise there, right? They are number 3 in opponent field goal percentage. Interestingly, Arizona is actually number 2 in opponent field goal percentage. And Kansas is number 1 in opponent field goal percentage. I think that a lot of that has to do with Badunga on the inside being such a defensive presence. But what do you make of this particular version of Houston, which of course gave Arizona a lot of problems last year, the first time that they were in the league together?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different faces, but, like you said, and like Lloyd said, the same kind of deal. They're as tough as ever. I mean, yeah, I think the thing that jumps out at me is, turnover percentage, top 10, 2-point percentage. They rank 17th defensively. It was just, they make you grind it out. And they're actually a pretty good offensive team this year too. Pretty efficient. I think Flemings has been a tremendous addition for him. I think he's been beyond what people expected anyway, and brings sort of that, an extra punch there. So offensively, I just think it's going to be a tough one. And they're coming off that game at Iowa State. I think the one thing you could say about them is they have had that propensity, because they are so defensive oriented. Sometimes, as good as they are that way, sometimes their offense just kind of disappears. And that's what happened in the championship game last year. And that's what happened against Iowa State. I think they gave up 11-point lead or something like that and lost. And granted, that's a crazy environment there at Hilton and Ames. But, if you're aiming to be a national championship team, you shouldn't be giving up that kind of lead in any environment. So that's so, and that could make it tougher for Arizona. That's why, and maybe it was too obvious, but I asked Lloyd about that last night, how, that's got to be a disadvantage, not only having to play at Houston, but on 2 fewer days rest, and at a time when Houston's going to be, pretty upset and ready to prove themselves on this. And this is, all the stakes are on the table here. First place in the league. This could decide the last number 1 NCAA tournament seed. It could determine certainly the Big 12 tournament seed. There's just a lot at stake here. So it's going to be something.
Yeah, I don't want to say that like I expect Arizona to lose this game, but as you said, like there are a lot of elements that are stacked against the Wildcats. If they were to somehow win it, being shorthanded at Houston, I mean, that would be a signature victory for them. I imagine that they will be underdogs in the betting markets for this one. You mentioned Kingston Flemings before. Really another sensational freshman in this unbelievably good freshman class across college basketball, averaging 16.6 points per game, shooting 49.7% from the floor. He is their leading scorer. He was, a pretty highly ranked recruit, like slightly below the very top tier, the Pete and Burries types, but he's been just as good or better than them or as good as anyone. And like you said, it's kind of given Houston's a little something different than maybe what they've had in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the year, the talk about freshmen with them was Chris Sanak, the big guy. And I mean, Flemings to some extent, but I mean, he's just been something, and granted, bigger guys sometimes can take a little longer to come along. But Flemings has really been just a huge factor for them right away.
Yeah, and Chris Sanak is doing just fine. He's averaging 9.5 points and 7.6 rebounds started every game. And they also have some guys that have been around for a while, like Milos Uzan. So am I saying that right? Is it Uzan?
Milos, yeah, they actually, Arizona actually way back. They actually looked at him, so I remember him.
Oh yeah,
I believe it's Milos, and then Joseph Tugler, Manuel Sharp. Those guys were around, and Tugler's one of the best defenders in the nation, and Sharp just does a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's they're something. Arizona at full strength. I think it's too bad for the viewers that Arizona is not going to be at full strength, because that really could be a heck of a matchup. But it is possible we see the same matchup on Saturday in Kansas City for the Big 12 championship again, just like last year.
That is a great point, and hopefully by that juncture, everyone will be back and healthy, and maybe we'll see those two teams go at it with both of them being at full strength. Bruce, that concludes this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Thanks to our special guest, Bruce Pascoe, for joining us. You, of course, can find all of his work at Tucson.com. And hey, you know what? Everybody out there, we have a version of our coverage that's sports only. If you get our app, you can pay for it, and it's a sports only subscription. If you're not interested in politics or news beyond sports, and you just want the Wildcats and high school coverage, you can do that through the Wildcaster app. I think it's $4.95 a month, which that's a pretty good deal for our stuff, Bruce. So I would highly recommend that to people if they're unaware of that particular offering. Please leave us a review, give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. I will be back sometime here next week. Maybe we'll get Justin on, our old friend Justin Spears, to maybe talk a little bit of football, which of course we do a lot in the fall. Justin's going to take some much deserved time off here, I think, after the NFL scouting combine, but maybe we'll talk a little gridiron on other topics with Justin on the Wildcast next week. Thanks, Bruce. Really appreciate it.
Have a good trip
to Texas.
You guys have good perspective on basketball too, and you're both plugged in. So, and there may be something going on with these guys you might want to dig into as well. But yeah, I mean, we'd all, it's like you said, we try and produce a lot. So hopefully it makes a difference. Yeah.
I think people appreciate it. I really do. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.